This one comes in from a child who says, my father died a few days after what we thought was a pretty routine surgery. Do we have a medical malpractice claim? And should we get an autopsy? That's a very common question after someone dies, and especially medically related. Should they get an autopsy?
Well, usually when something like that happens, the people involved have some idea of what should have happened. You know, it comes on the general heading of sometimes bad things happen to good people, and it's unmixed with anybody's negligence or fault. Now, that's not to say that it might not have been caused by somebody's medical negligence, but certainly you always have to be able to prove what the negligence was and whether or not the negligence was the cause of the injury or the death. So normally what you would do in that situation is you would get all of the medical records associated with that procedure or that hospitalization. You would then go to a lawyer and have them look at it, and the lawyer would call in a physician as a consultant to go over the records and see whether or not there was anything that raises a question in those records. Now, back to the heart of the question is, should you have an autopsy done? Yes, if there's a reasonable suspicion that something was done untoward or in the way of medical negligence that was a cause of the death, certainly you should have an autopsy done. And again, you have to start by going to a competent legal source to point you in the right direction. Autopsies are expensive, but that is something that's absolutely necessary in a wrongful death case following surgery in a setting like it has just been described. BJ, you want to add anything?
Well, I would just echo what you're saying. And, you know, when you file the case, if there is a case where your physician said there was a breach in the standard of care, you've got to prove not only that there was a breach or error, but that error caused the damages. And if you don't have an autopsy in the situation, you can count on the defense, the doctors, lawyers, or the nurses, or hospitals, lawyers, coming up with a bunch of reasons why that person died other than their negligence. So if you and they'll always point to the fact that we couldn't prove it because we didn't have autopsies establishing for sure what caused the death. So yeah, it's an essential element of the case if you can get it. Oftentimes though, you know, families are upset when something like that happens and the hospital will come in and say, you want an autopsy, and we don't really see a need for it. And then the family will go, okay, we don't need one. And then it'll go on with the involvement in the funeral. Which complicates matters. So yes, if you have any suspicion that something happened that shouldn't have happened, it is costly, but it's well worth it, and it's priceless if in the event you have a malpractice case.
Let me say this too, to BJ's point, and to make it really simple. Everybody now is aware of what happened to George Floyd. He died as a result of a police officer having his knee on his neck for 8-point-something minutes. But if you heard the aftermath from the police department, there was all kinds of speculation that he might have died from something else. And that's kind of the way it is in a medical malpractice case. They look for other reasons, other causes. So you have to be able to nail down the exact cause of the death in order to prove your case.
Okay, and that's why the autopsy is so important.
Absolutely, and that's why an autopsy was done in that case, and they did establish that it was because he died of asphyxiation.
And if it's a surgical error, if he nicked something he shouldn't have nicked, or she nicked something she shouldn't have nicked, you know, that's not going to be in the operative report because they're not going to put that in writing. They probably didn't even notice if they did it, but an autopsy would help you establish that as well.
Oh, that's good to know. Good to know. All right, thank you, gentlemen.